everybody, I'm Grasshopper here. Welcome back to Accidentalized Gaming Academy. And this is episode 6 of my Accidentalized 1940 Global 2nd Edition tutorial series. I'm calling this Advanced Training. In this episode, we're going to go over 3 major concepts, and you can call them political situations if you like. There's special rules, additional rules if you will. These concepts that need to be understood. We're going to go over the Mongolian rule, we're going to go over China rules, and we're going to tackle this UK split economy dynamic. Let's first look at Mongolia. So, in a past video in this series, we talked about neutral territories. Let's take a look. We have 6 strict neutral territories making up all of Mongolia. We have 2 standing army here, 1 standing army, 1 there, and 2 more there. So that's total of 6 standing armies that can be triggered. Now, Mongolia is different than all other strict neutrals or neutral territories, and we're going to get into that right now. It's very misunderstood by many young new players, and even experienced players have trouble with this. Let's get into this now. In a past video, I explained that as Russia, what you want to do is you want to declare war against Japan right off the bat. Reason being is because this will not negate or activate the Mongolian rule, and those are 2 status conditions that we're going to talk a lot about: activating the Mongolian rule and negating the Mongolian rule. So Mongolia has nothing to do with this action of declaration of war between Russia and Japan, so just go ahead and do that right from the beginning. So declare war verbally. You don't have to attack Japan, but you can declare war verbally on Japan. There's no consequences, there's no disadvantage to Russia in doing so. Now that we got that out of the way, declaring war and being at war has nothing to do with the activation or negating of the Mongolian rule. Just like, for example, coming in here and pushing into China. The rules say that that is an act of war, and they would be correct. That is an act of war, but because you've already declared war on Japan, moving into China is of no consequences. You're already at war. So why do I bring this up? Many reasons in explaining this concept. Let's go over again negating and activating the Mongolian rule. What will happen if the Mongolian rule is activated? Well, all these standing army plus all these territories are going to become Russian. We're going to put Russian roundels or control markers. We're going to put Russian infantry. All this will become Russian. Now the Russians can now move through this territory, but also too the Japanese can attack through this territory as well. Now obviously Japan does not want to deal with more infantry units, but there might be something in their strategy that will call for something like this to happen. How is this going to happen? Well, take a look at these Russian territories that are adjacent to Mongolia. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 Russian territories, originally controlled Russian territories, remember, adjacent to Mongolia. This one up here, for example, obviously is not adjacent to Mongolia. It does not share a common border with Mongolia down here. All right. Take a look here. Remember what I said about identifying originally controlled territories. We have a China originally controlled territory. Look at this. This is also a China originally controlled territory. A lot of people get confused that just because Japan starts with units there in Jehol or Manchuria, that it is a Japan originally controlled territory. That's not correct. The roundel printed on the map will tell us, look at here, Korea. We know that Korea is an originally controlled territory of Japan, even though the colorization of it is the same as Manchuria, which has a China roundel. So we're looking at Russian originally controlled territories. This is not here, and here. Now it gets activated. All this turns Russian. It gets activated if Japan attacks an originally controlled Russian territory that shares a border with any of these Mongolian territories. Now, that's all we need to know about activating, okay? A lot of people get confused with this whole act of war. Remember, we said if you move into here, that's an act of war against Japan. Correct. There's no problem with being at war with Japan. Even if you come in here and help the Chinese, Japan's saying, well, doesn't that negate the Mongolian rule? And it doesn't. Even if Japan decides to attack this with the Russians here, it does not negate, does not activate, nothing, because these are not originally controlled territories of Russia. I'll tell you now how it gets negated. Russia comes in here and attacks a controlled territory. It doesn't have to be originally controlled, okay, but a controlled territory of Japan, okay, and they come in here and they attack Manchuria. That is going to negate the Mongolian rule. We come in here and we attack Korea. It doesn't have to be adjacent, but we've attacked a controlled territory of Japan. That is going to negate. Negating means that these will never become Soviet Union. So there's a special bond here between Russia and Mongolia. Mongolia says, we will become on your side if Japan attacks your originally controlled territories that are bordering us. But if you attack them, then we're not going to join you. So we're talking about negating and activating the Mongolian rule. What does it? So we talked about attacking here. That's going to negate the Mongolian rule. We talked about Russia attacking Korea. That's also going to negate the Mongolian rule. Okay, we come around here and let's say that Japan controls this. All right. Now, please look in the comments section to find out if I'm right on any of this, because people will make comments and correct me if I'm wrong, and I really appreciate it. A lot of these rules are sophisticated, okay? So I'm going over it the best that I know how. If Russia attacks this territory that is Japan controlled, then that would negate the Mongolian rule. Go ahead in the comments and let me know if I'm right or if I'm wrong on that. I'm pretty sure. But if China attacks this, obviously Russia is not attacking a Japan-controlled territory that's adjacent to Mongolia. Now, obviously Russia will never control these territories, never. Even if they liberate them, okay, which would be a situation that negates the Mongolian rule, their roundels are never going to come up. These are always going to be Chinese liberated roundels, okay? So the only way an activation can happen is from an originally controlled territory of the Soviet Union that is bordering the Mongolian territories, okay? That's how it gets activated. So if Japan travels this way, right off the bat, they're going to, even if there's no units here, just walking in and is an attack. It's a combat movement, and controlling it is going to activate this, and Russia will claim all these standing armies. They will put their roundels on all of these, okay? If Japan leaves this alone and decides to come all the way this way, they will not activate the Mongolian rule until this territory is attacked, which is a Soviet originally controlled territory bordering or adjacent to a Mongolian territory. Coming here will not activate it. So I hope that is helpful. It's a sophisticated rule when talking about the neutrals here, because Mongolia is special in this case. Let's look at one last thing about Mongolia. Now, remember in my last video I talked about strict neutrals. If the Axis attacks Sweden, which is a strict neutral, then all other strict neutrals are going to become pro-Allied. And also, too, if the Allies attack Sweden, which is a pro-neutral, or Spain, which is a pro-neutral, then all other strict neutrals on the board will become pro-Axis. However, over here in Mongolia, the only way that these Mongolian territories will ever become pro-Axis is if Russia attacks them, okay, as a strict neutral. Now, attacking this as a strict neutral will prompt all strict neutrals on the board to go pro-Axis, as well as this pro-Axis. Therefore, we can say right now, and you can guess what I'm going to say next, is that they would never attack Mongolia. There's no reason for the Russians to ever attack Mongolia as a strict neutral. Not only are they giving away the control of Mongolia if the situation ever occurred that they were attacked, but they're giving the Japanese the control of any other standing army on Mongolia, plus any strict neutral on the board. It's going to activate. Okay, now that's the only way these will ever become pro-Axis. So let's just understand that we're never going to do that. There's never any reason for the Russians to attack Mongolia. Okay, so therefore there should never be any reason for Mongolia to ever be pro-Axis. But what about if Sweden is attacked by an allied nation? We've got a strict neutral attacked by the Allies. Well, wouldn't the strict neutrals of Mongolia also turn to pro-Axis? No. No, the rule is that they would not turn pro-Axis if any strict neutral was attacked by Allies over anywhere on the map. Okay. Now, if Germany were to attack Turkey, which is a strict neutral, these act the same way. They would become pro-allied. Okay. Now we got to be careful. One last thing. So a lot of people have tried to do this. They will attack Amur, and they will also try and attack this here, because of course, I mean, why wouldn't they want to attack this if they know that all this is going to become Russian when they attack this? Well, why not attack this and this at least, and maybe even this too if they can, or this from China. If this happens on the same turn, then it's going to be as if Japan attacked a strict neutral, and therefore all other strict neutrals will be triggered as pro-allied. Okay, so this activates the Mongolian rule. But if this happens on the same turn as this, the strict neutrals are triggered instead of the Mongolian rule activated. Okay? So I'm sure that there might be something there that I kind of missed, or maybe got wrong or something. Just remember, and I see a lot of new players arguing about this because it is difficult to interpret. Just remember that declaring war and moving into China, these are not things that activate or negate the Mongolian rule. Just remember that it's all about the territories that surround Mongolia, the Russian territories that surround Mongolia. It's all about them, okay? And these two mostly, all right? So there's strategy behind whether or not Japan wants to attack Mongolia. There's strategy behind whether or not Russia wants to provoke them to attack here and get another 6 units. But also, too, you may not want Japan to reach Russia up here coming through central Mongolia and whatnot. They want them to take a long path, either this way or this way. Okay? So I'm going to turn it off now. We're going to take a little cut. We're going to come back with another clip. We're going to talk about China rules, guys. China rules. Be right back. All right, everybody, we're back, and we're going to talk about China rules. Now, there's a whole page in the Pacific Rule Book discussing China rules. I'm going to go over it all in a nutshell right here. There are some specifics when playing China. So obviously in this game, there's lots of different powers, playable nations that have similar turn sequence, whether it be purchase new units or combat or non-combat movement, collect income or place new units. China has a few tweaks, and they're mostly just restrictions. So let's take a look at the first restriction that's explained in the China rules, and that's the movement restriction. Take a look at the units that are in the setup here. We've got some infantry, which are mostly what China will have throughout the game. We have a fighter here representing the Flying Tigers. So if I pull back here, I can get all in one frame, basically all the originally controlled China territories in one frame there. Remember, we talked about Manchuria and all these coastal territories, anything with a Chinese roundel. So China is restricted in the fact that they can only move through and on their own originally controlled territories. Now, there's a couple of exceptions that we'll talk about here in a second, but let's really hammer that point home. They can only move through their originally controlled territories, anything with a Chinese roundel on it. They cannot move into Korea at all. That is not an originally controlled territory of China. Therefore, they cannot move in there. They cannot pull back into Russian territories. These are not China originally controlled territories. These are Soviet Union originally controlled territories. If they are pushed back all the way and retreat back to here, they cannot move into Kazakhstan. So they are restricted only to their originally controlled territories. Take a look at this fighter here. Now, we all know that the movement of an aircraft is more than an infantry, but that does not mean that it is allowed to fly over territories that are not originally controlled of China. It must also stay within territories that are originally controlled by China. Now, they cannot move into French Indochina, even if it's adjacent here to an originally controlled territory there. They may not move there. They may not move into Shan State, okay? Not an originally controlled territory of China, and again, not Korea. Obviously, this plane cannot fly over into a sea zone and land back, even if it's landing on an originally controlled territory of China, which this is. It may not fly into a sea zone and land back, even if it's a legal movement, even if they have the legal amount of spaces, and even if they really want to try and destroy 5 unprotected transports and they're legally able to do so movement, they may not. It's against the rules. They cannot fly outside of originally controlled China territories. Those are, most part, the restrictions that the rulebook talks about. Now, what are these 2 exceptions that I told you? Well, take a look here. We got Hong Kong, Kwangtung. We got Burma, okay? Now, China may move into these 2 spaces. So there is exceptions. Kwangtung, an exception. Burma, an exception. But there's some specifics to each one. Right here, Hong Kong, China may move into there only to liberate. So the only reason why China would ever be allowed to move into Kwangtung is if Japan controls it. And China has the ability to move in and liberate it for the British. All right. So that is the only way. If Britain owns this, or if there's a bunch of Americans here, China from Guangxi may not move in to an Allied controlled Hong Kong. They may only move in to a Japan controlled occupied Hong Kong in order to liberate it. So over here in Burma is different. They do not need to follow the restriction of liberation the way Hong Kong does. So even if the Allies control Burma, China can move their units into Burma. All right. Take a look here and see this line. I'll try and focus in. Look at this big red line snaking through here. It starts in India, goes through Burma, Yunnan, and then Szechuan. Okay, this is called the Burma Road. It says right there, Burma Road. Now, a lot of moving into Burma has to do with the ability to follow the Burma Road. Now, they may not go into India, though. Okay, so even though the Burma Road begins in India, China may only move units into Burma, whether it be to attack and liberate Burma or to move in and support the allies in Burma. It's all part of the road here, okay, but they may not go into India. So Kwangtung, there to liberate it only, may move in. Burma, they may move in at any time, whether it be liberation or support. That is essentially the China rules. Now let's get into how they place units. Almost every playable nation has at least one production facility to build units on. However, China does not have any production units. We don't have these factories, okay, that everybody else has. So how are we going to place our units? Well, for example, China starts with 12 IPCs on the income tracker. That's a result of the accumulation in total of all the territories that they control adds up to 12 to start off with. These, of course, are not included because Japan has stolen those away from them to begin the game. So China could, if they do well, add to that income, but more than likely, Japan is going to attack, move in, and they're going to lose more and more. Now, they can spend their money and purchase new units. However, they're limited to the units that they can purchase. They may only buy infantry. So China, another restriction when it comes to purchasing new units, they may only purchase infantry. And how do those new units get placed on the board? Well, they can put them anywhere they like. They can put one here, one here, one here. They can put all of them in one spot. They can even put them in a territory that they just fought and took back and controlled. For example, if they come in here and attack this and now they control it, they can put all their new units on the newly taken territory, which is not really a restriction. I mean, it's a restriction for every other nation that takes over a new territory. They can't build on it. But here for China, they can place their newly purchased infantry units and place them on a territory that they just took that turn. Remember, it has to be an originally controlled territory of China. Okay, you cannot place units on Burma if you're there. You can never control Burma. You can never control Kwangtung because these are going to be liberated. Okay. However, there is an exception that if Calcutta is taken and they take this, I believe that China could take that 3 IPCs and put a China marker here. I'm not sure. Check the comments and see if anybody has commented on that. Can China take Kwangtung and control it and collect for the 3 IPCs if Calcutta has been sacked? Okay. I'm not sure about that. I know it's in the rules, but I didn't read them before doing this video. What else? Well, there is a national objective, and we will go over national objectives in a separate video talking about if the Allies control all territories connecting the Burma Road. So India, Burma, Yunnan, Sichuan, these are all territories connected by the Burma Road. If the Allies control all 4 of them, then China is going to get 6 IPC bonus. We're going to talk about national objective bonus money in the next video, but while we're here in China talking about China, we should mention this because it also allows them to increase their ability to purchase units, not only by the 6 IPCs that they're going to collect on top of their income that's showing on the tracker, but they're also going to be able to purchase artillery units. So if the road is secure, and remember, it has to be secured at the beginning of their turn. Of course, when you're purchasing new units, the purchasing new units comes at the beginning of your turn. Therefore, you must have control of the Burma Road at the beginning of your turn to be able to purchase the artillery units and place them at the end during the place new units phase. And we're going to get into all that, and I know it might be a little mumbo jumbo for you, but we're going to get into turn sequences and everything and how these phases are done in proper order and whatnot. But remember, I did say that they can only purchase infantry units. There is one exception to that, and that is when they control the Burma Road, they could also use their income to purchase artillery as well. So a little bit more of an attack punch for them. So that is the China rules, guys. I hope I explained that right. Again, another sophisticated rule set in 1940 global. It's quite possible I may have gotten something wrong, but I'm chugging along. Let's get into the split economy of the UK. We need to know that. Okay, be right back. All right, everyone, we're back, and we're discussing the third part of the sophisticated concepts that we're tackling in this episode. We looked at Mongolia and we looked at China rules. Now we're going to tackle this idea of a split economy for all UK nations. Take a look, and we've got here 28 IPCs with a European UK roundel. Also, that came in your game set is a Union Jack roundel. We got 17 IPCs as their starting income. We got 2 sets of money for one nation. 2 incomes, one nation. We got to keep this stuff separate. That's why we put the Union Jack representing the Pacific, and then we put this here representing Europe. Let's take a look. Also, with 2 economies comes 2 capitals. There's London in the United Kingdom, London, and that is the capital of the United Kingdom Europe economy. And over here we've got Calcutta, and this is the capital of the UK Pacific economy. Now, the reason why they had to do this, obviously, is that they brought out 2 separate games. They brought out Pacific and they brought out Europe 1940, and of course, to bring them together, create one global experience, something had to be done with the amount of income that UK was making all across the globe. They didn't want to be able to have a nation put everything on one capital in London. That's what's so great about this game. One thing I can say about this game that is different from almost every single Axis and Allies franchise game is that the possibility of Sea Lion, the Germans landing on London and capturing it, is possible in this game. Can't say that for every game. And a big part of why that possibility exists is the split economy. Okay, now obviously you can't spend all the Pacific income on units that are going to help you defend London. Okay, but you do have a good chunk of income there. Now, the thing that you have to remember about the UK split economy is that you have to always keep them separately. Now, I'm using a method to identify my stacks of chips here. You're going to have to do the same in some way. You cannot mix them together, okay? Now, if we look at the turn sequence between nations, we've got purchase new units, we got combat movements, non-combat movements. We do things like place new units, collect income. We do all kinds of things throughout our turn sequence. Now, the UK has a specific dynamic in that their turn sequence is a little bit different when they purchase new units and when they collect income. Those are the 2 phases in a turn sequence that are different for the UK, and only those 2. So purchase new units and collect income. You could also say placing new units is also divided as well. Let's take a look and find out what we're going to do. We're going to place this here, and we're going to place this down here. Anything that's purchased from Pacific money has to be placed on a factory in the Pacific that is on the right-hand side of this line. So if we're thinking about the Pacific board, we're going to go directly up here. All right, and we're going to make a divide, and we're going to place it on any factory that the UK owns on this side. Now, normally they only control one factory. I mean, they can purchase on this, but they're never really going to control that. Japan's going to take that. This is Anzac. It's a separate nation. Therefore, they're not going to place on this factory at all. Okay, if you take a look at my map, you can see how I have customized it to have these UK roundels, these Union Jack roundels on the board. The reason why your out-of-box board does not have these is because when they sold the Pacific game, they have these roundels on them, so it's a little confusing. You have to use the rule book and find out that West India is part of the Pacific economy. That's why I've printed a Union Jack on here. Okay? And just because it's the right of the board does not mean that it's all UK Pacific. Take a look up there. We got a couple of Canadian roundels. Now that income, which is 1 IPC, that income is going to go over to UK Europe. Okay, so 1 IPC here, or sorry, 2 IPCs here belong to India, and the 1 IPC up there in Canada will belong to London. So 28 IPCs can be purchased and placed on this side of the board. Obviously, in Europe, we've got a couple more options than Pacific side. For example, we have a factory here we can place units on. We have a factory down here we can place units on. And of course, the capital, London, we can place units on. So any units purchased with this money coming from the UK economy must be placed on this side of the board. And of course, like I said, any units purchased with the Pacific economy money must be placed here, or if there's another factory purchase someplace else. Now, Borneo cannot place a factory. It's an island, so this is the only place it would be placed on, and that's usually an impossibility. So this is usually the only factory that money can be spent. So now that we've got that out of the way, okay, two separate piles of income, okay, that's where it ends. When you purchase new units and you keep your units separate here, this was purchased with this, okay, they get put on the board later. And then we placed this over here, and we separated the units that we purchased, and we keep them separate. Now, that's where it ends. Now, you go into combat movement, and you're going to move all your units the way that you would as if it were all one nation. So forget about this line anymore, okay? This line only helps you when you are collecting money and when you're placing units on the board. That's it. So now that we got that out of the way, it's time to combat move. These can go this way, this can go this way, this can go this way. All these tan pieces work together. The tan pieces all work together in combat and non-combat. Somebody will say, well, if I take this unit and take Persia, does money from Persia go to the Pacific economy? And the answer is no. This is a tan piece, just like this is a tan piece, okay? And I just want to hammer this home because this really gets confusing. I can see why, because it used to confuse me as well, too. Just because these units on the Pacific side doesn't mean that these units belong to the Pacific. These units are tan just like these units are tan. They all work together in conjunction, going from Pacific to Europe and Europe to Pacific, and fighting common enemies, the Italians, the Japanese, right? I mean, this battleship could go over here. You know, just because a unit from this side attacks and gains money here, or a unit from this side is transporting, attacks and gains money from this side, doesn't mean that economy shifts from one map to the other depending on which units were used. Okay? So you've purchased new units, that's separate. Now that you've gone into combat movement, that's all entwined together as one nation. Even non-combat, one nation. Okay? Now you get into the placement of new units, we got to get back into our split economy mentality, and we're going to take all the units that were spent earlier with the Pacific money, and remember, they have to go on the Pacific side, this factory. We're going to take, during the place new units phase, all the units that were purchased with the income from the Europe, and we're going to place them on production facilities that are here on the Europe map, whether it be Quebec, London, South Africa, or even if there was one purchased in Persia. Okay, so Europe, okay, and then from here over Pacific. So now that we've placed our new units, which is a split economy dynamic, we're going to collect our income, which is another split economy dynamic. All right. So you're going to go up and down on the income tracker based on the territories that you've lost and the territories that you've gained for that Union Jack, which represents the Pacific economy. You're going to collect that income. You're also going to collect your income for Europe, which will move up and down based on the territories that you lose or the territories that you gain. Also, too, in the next video, we're going to talk about national objectives, but UK Europe has their own national objectives. That is bonus cash that is going to be added to their income. And if they can be gained, UK Pacific has their own national objectives. That is bonus cash that they can be added to their own income for the Pacific. And once those stacks are reestablished, you're going to place a separate stack there for next turn. You're going to collect your new money based on your new income, and you're going to have a separate stack now there. So, to recap the UK split economy, the only time you think about the split economy is when you're purchasing new units, when you're placing new units, and when you're collecting income. All other phases, like the military phases of combat movement, resolving combat, non-combat movement, forget about split economy. You're all tan pieces. You're all one nation at that point, okay? Well, I hope that was helpful in explaining that. It will become second nature to you, of course. And that whole business about an infantry unit leaving from Calcutta, moving over to Persia, taking that territory and thinking that the Persia income now becomes Pacific economy, that happens a lot. You know, don't worry about it. I've thought about that. I've made that mistake. I think everybody's made that mistake, right? But if they're all tan pieces, they're all fighting on the same map. It's just the economy aspects of the turn sequence that are different. Well, that's great, guys. We went over quite a bit of stuff, some sophisticated rules, some things that were really needed. Mongolian rule, China rules, split economy rules. Now we're going to get into the next episode, national objectives, and we're going to talk about all kinds of bonus money that you can go for, claim territories that are specific to you earning more money, or objectives, battling, where to battle, which territories, which islands to take, which will give you more economy, which of course boosters your war effort, allows you to purchase even more units or more powerful units that are going to help you win this game. We're going to go over all of that in the next episode, episode 7. Thanks a lot, guys. Cheers. Really appreciate all your support. Again, I hope this was helpful. If I made a mistake, please talk about it in the comments, and we'll clear those up. You know, hopefully I didn't make any mistakes. I don't want to be the author of confusion when doing these videos. I'm trying to help teach the game. So again, just look at the comments and see if there was anything brought up that might be different. We want to play this game the way that it was meant to be played. So guys, cheers. Thanks a lot again. And make sure you check out Jonathan Mayer's World War I 1914 tutorial series, also on my channel. He's doing a great job teaching that franchise game as well. Till next time, may all your dice rolls be ones, guys. Cheers.